Hello, awesome sixth graders. It's Mrs. Lee. I'm going to give you our first head notes for our new unit. We're going to be working with integer operations. And we just finished up fractions and decimal operations. So now we're just dealing with integers. And if you remember back at the beginning of the year when we did our number system and we classified all our numbers and we got to integers, integers are all positive and negative whole numbers. Sometimes you'll hear me say all positive whole numbers and their opposites. So we're only dealing with whole numbers, positive and negative. We're going to move around a little bit in these notes. The most important thing when you're adding with integers is you have to make sure you pay attention to your integer sign. What am I working with? Am I working with negatives or am I working with positives? This first sheet of notes is really, we're just working with integers of the same sign. That's it. So here on the top, it says when adding integers of the, and we're going to just put same here. So when they are the same sign, okay, you're going to add the absolute values of the integers. Now remember absolute value. So if I have absolute value of 5, negative 5, or the absolute value of 5, they both equal 5. Because I am just talking about the distance of a number away from 0. That's what absolute value is. So it doesn't matter if it's negative 5 or positive 5, they are both 5 units from 0. So when you're adding integers, you're looking at the absolute value of the numbers and you're adding those absolute values of those numbers, and then you're going to keep the same sign. Okay? So if I'm doing a negative plus a negative, it's going to be a negative. If I'm doing a positive plus a positive, it's going to be a positive. So just same sign, add and keep the sign. That's all you have to do. Okay, we'll come back up to this little example right here. So now I'm going to go down to the bottom because I wish they had it kind of reversed in a sense. So I'm going to show you how you can illustrate it, model it on a number line, and I highly recommend that you use a number line right now. I'm also going to show you how to use it with counters, and we'll work with both of these in class tomorrow, but I just want to kind of get your head going. So here I can see that I have a negative 5 and a negative 8. So I already know that my answer is going to be negative. Okay, so when we're working with numbers on a number line, I always start at 0 here, and then I'm going to go to my first number, which is negative 5. So I want to go from 0 to negative 5. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right here is my negative 5. Okay, my pen's been acting up lately. I don't know what's going on. There we go. So there's my negative 5. Now it says that I want to add to my negative 5 another negative 8. So that negative means I'm still going to go to the left. Okay, so when you're adding negatives, you're moving to the left always. Okay, so I'm starting at negative 5 and I'm going to go 8 more backwards. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that will put me at negative 13. Okay, so again, we're thinking about absolute values. So 5 plus absolute value of negative 8, which would be 8, would be 13. We have to stop, pause, look at my sign, and they're both negative. So my answer is negative 13. And I also showed it to you, illustrated it on the number line. Okay, so here on the next example, I have 7 plus a 3 plus a 1. Now, I know you're thinking these are addition, but really this positive, or this addition is a positive on my 3. And this right here, addition, I say positive 1. Okay, but again, I'm going to start at 0 and I'm going to go to 7. So start at 0 and go 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be 7. And then it says I want to go forward another 3. So 1, 2, 3. That would give me at 10. And then I just want to go one more, and that would be at 11. So I know absolute value, again, if I need to. I'm adding all my absolute values, which would get me at 11. And all positive to keep the sign. So I don't need to show my positive on my 11. It's assumed positive. So again, adding negatives, I'm moving to the left. Adding positives, I'm moving to the right. It makes me start thinking about that song, to the left, to the left. Okay. Anyway, okay, now we're going to come up here and we're going to look at my counters. Now remember, anything that's negative, I'm going to need to write a negative, okay, on my counters, and a positive is a positive. But here they're saying if I'm adding negatives, my answer is going to be negative. If I'm adding both positives, my answer is going to be positive, okay? Just always remember that. Adding same signs, you add and keep the sign. Okay, here I have 4 plus 3. And so these are all positive. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So all together I have 7. Here I have negative 5. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives. And I'm going to add another negative 2. Negative 2. So all together, think about absolute value. 5 and 2 is 7. Stop and pause, look at the sign, they're negatives, so I'm keeping my same sign. Here I have negative 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm combining, I'm adding an additional negative 4. So altogether, I'm going to have 12. Go back, look at my sign, it's negative, so I add and keep my sign. Okay? So we can do the same thing up here. Now, this problem up here at the top with the star right here, the only thing that's different about the way this is written is that they're not putting it as they're putting it with a subtraction or a negative sign. I prefer seeing it this way because I don't like the double signs. I don't like the double signs here. But for right now, if you want to, you can say this negative 5 with a negative 3 is the same thing as saying negative 5 plus a negative 3. But you're really just combining. That's what we did. We just combined all of my counters here. So you're adding or combining. Just think of it that way. So if I have a negative 3 and a negative 5, absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So my answer is 8. Stop, pause, look at my sign. I'm adding with the same signs. So my answer is going to be negative 8. Okay, and again, practice down here. Positive plus a positive is always going to be positive. A negative plus a negative is always going to be negative. So just wrap that around your head. If I'm adding and I have the same signs, I add and keep the signs. So here, 38 plus a positive 5 is going to be a positive 43. A positive 12 plus a positive 15 is going to be a positive 27. Here I have a negative 20 plus a negative 8. It's going to be a negative 28. Negative 14, combining with a negative 6, it's going to be a negative 20. Positive 13 with a positive 7 is going to be a positive 20. And the negative 9 with a with a negative 14, keep my sign negative, and it's going to be a negative 23. Okay? I think we answered them all. Okay, so I'm going to pause you for a second to go to the next sheet of notes. Okay, so the first sheet of notes was when we were adding integers and they had the same sign. So when we're adding integers with the same sign, we're just adding and keeping the sign. Okay, that's it. But now, though, sometimes we're going to add integers with different signs. And so right here, I'm going to fill in the notes, but like on the first sheet, I'm going to start at the bottom. So here, even though we're adding, if we are adding with different signs, and that's what they said we're going to do. We're adding with different signs. The first step is really you're going to subtract, and I'll show you why. So you're going to subtract, and you're going to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value. And again, the greater absolute value is going to be the number that is furthest away from 0. Okay, you're going to then, so that's the first step. That when you're adding with different integer signs, you're really going to subtract, and you're going to subtract the smallest absolute value from the greatest absolute value, and then you're going to use the sign of the greatest or largest, whatever you want to say, the largest absolute value in the sum. Okay, so go slow on this one. This one it tricks people up a little bit, and it's not because you don't know how to add or subtract. It's just because you're going to allow the signs to do a little mind trick on you. But don't. The first thing you're always going to do when we're adding integers, you're going to stop and you're going to look at the signs. If they're the same, you're going to add and keep the sign. If they're different, you're really going to subtract. Okay, so let's go to the bottom and we'll do it on a number line. Okay, so here we have a -8 first, so that's where I'm going to go first. So I'm starting at 0 and I'm going to go back -8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here's my -8, and that's where I am. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. So -8. And now this time I want to go in a positive 5 units. So I'm going to start at my 8 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's really going to get me back to a -3. Okay. I can use a number line, or I can also, like it says, use the absolute value. So I'm taking 8 and I have 5. So if I subtract those two, because I have different signs, I have 3. And then I go back and I see which one had the largest absolute value, which was 8. What's the sign on that 8? Negative. So I keep it at -3. Okay. Next one. I'm starting at 0, and the first number tells me to go to 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm right here at 7. Now this one says I'm going to add, but I'm going to add a -8. So that means I'm going back 8 units. So here's my 7 going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that takes me back to a -1. So I can see my answer is -1, but using the algorithm, absolute value of 7 is 7, and the absolute value of -8 is 8. And because I'm adding but with different signs, I'm really going to subtract. So 8 take away 7 is 1. Go back to my numbers and which one had the largest absolute value, which was -8. So I have a negative on my sum. Okay, now up here we're just going to go to the counters. Now on this one we have 5 positive. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and I have -8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we talked about the inverse property of addition. So when I have a +1 and a -1, those create a 0 pair. +1, -1, 0 pair. +1, -1, 0 pair. +1 with the -1, 0 pair. +1 with the -1 is a 0 pair. So then what I'm left with is just 3 negatives. Okay, so that's how I can use counters. But if I'm using the algorithm, I have an absolute value of 5, and I have an absolute value of -8, which is 8. Even though it says I'm adding, I have different signs, so I know I'm really subtracting. So I know it's 8 take away 5, which is 3. Go back and look and see which had the largest absolute value, which was -8. What sign's on it? Negative. So my answer is -3. Okay. And then up here, again, go slow. If you want to draw it out on a number line, you can, or if you want to do counters, we will use all of those tomorrow in class. So here we're thinking absolute value. So absolute value of 3, and I'm adding, but I have different signs, so I'm really going to subtract. So subtract 3 away from 7, which would be 4. Go back. Which one, 3 or negative 7, had the largest absolute value? Right here, negative 7. What's the sign? Negative. Okay, here's another one. I know I'm adding, but I have different signs, so I'm really going to subtract. And I have a negative 28 plus a 13. So I have absolute value of 28 is 28. With a 13, I'm going to take away. So that's going to leave me with 15. Go back. Which of these, negative 28 or 13, had the largest absolute value? Well, 28. What's the sign? Negative. Okay. Absolute value of 15. Absolute value of negative 14. So even though it says I'm adding, I have different signs, so I'm really subtracting. And I have absolute value of negative 14 is 14. Absolute value of 15 is 15. Subtract, I get 1. Go back and look. Which of these two had the largest absolute value? 15. What's my sign? Positive. Now you can write it if you want, but if you don't, it's assumed positive. So either way. Okay, here we go. I have a 27 plus a negative 54. Even though it says I'm adding, I know I'm not because I have opposite signs, so I'm really going to subtract. Stop and think about my absolute values of my numbers. Absolute value of 27 is 27. Absolute value of negative 54 is 54. So largest absolute value, take away the smallest absolute value, I'm going to get 27. Now go back and look. Negative 54 or 27, which one had the largest absolute value? Which one is farther from 0? My negative 54. So my sum has a negative. Okay, just think this over. We're going to practice a lot more tomorrow and probably even on the following Monday. Have a good night. See you guys tomorrow.